You're saying more Nats, less cuts. What would you save?
Well,
what would you given the tsunami that is coming our way on public spending cuts? I'm agreeing with your figures.
Right,
I'm not disputing them. Vast numbers of public spending cuts. Isn't it deceiving the voters to say Scotland can be protected? Scotland alone can avoid the typhoon.
But that's not what we're saying. So let me give you some specific examples. But let's acknowledge we've now reached agreement on the extent of the challenge and the fact.
I was there at the start, Mr. Salmond.
Right, whether we agree with our strategy or not, we're offering a strategy that people can judge on. Now, in terms of influence, it's now odds on that we're going to have a balanced parliament. In a balanced parliament, as we know in Scotland from all of the evidence over the last 3 years, that parties can have a considerable role, and a strong bloc of SNP and Plaid Cymru MPs would have a considerable role. Now, let me detail some things that can be achieved in the immediate next 2 or 3 years without this benefit to anyone from having that block of SNP and Plaid MPs. I mean, let's start with the fossil fuel levy. There are £200 million lying in a London bank account, Scotland's money, paid for by Scotland's generators. It can only come to Scotland, but currently there's a Treasury embargo, and they say if we get the 200 million, it'll be deducted from health and education or other spending in Scotland. Now, that's a ludicrous situation. It's a sort of area where a strong bloc of SNP and Plaid MPs will certainly get that concession, and it's of no disbenefit to anyone. Now, £200 million isn't an answer to this problem. No. But listen, £200 million is not a mere bagatelle, and it would be a huge, substantial investment in the great renewable industries of Scotland. I can give you some other ones if you like.
That'll do for now. Okay. Are there any areas of public spending that you would particularly protect? For example, you've set up an independent review of spending, and they are already saying, they're thinking the unthinkable. They're saying there should be no areas that should be protected. Free personal care shouldn't be protected as a right. Health spending, no, it shouldn't be protected as a right. We have to look, they say, critically at absolutely everything. That's the approach taken by the team that you have set up.
Yes, well, we'll put a priority, as we have done in government, in protecting the frontline services. That's what we'll do. We'll protect the health budget, the frontline services. That's what we shall do in government. But it's quite right that we've set up...
when there's a 70... what is it? The IFS, Institute of Fiscal Studies, today says that the parties are only promising a quarter of the cuts.
And they're talking, and let's get this right, Brian, the IFS are talking about the three London parties, Labour, Tory and the Liberal Democrats.
We're talking about the UK budget, which leads to the Scottish budget.
Absolutely.
And you can't disinvent it.
No, I'm not disinventing it. I'm just saying that last week we set out not just what the implications for the Scottish budget was, but the implications for the UK budget. And the IFS figures are uncannily similar, probably because they're both good economists, to that of the Chief Economic Advisor of the Scottish Government. So we know the scale of the challenge. Now, let me repeat. Tomorrow I'll be saying this is how the SNP at this election is putting forward a programme to tackle that massive debt, that iceberg under the water that the London parties don't want to talk about. And just to repeat, let's not waste money on things that don't matter. That's number one. Two, let's have the sensible efficiency savings running forward. And three, and this is crucial, we must have economic growth greater than is being anticipated to bring the jobs and the revenues into the exchequer.
I'll move off finance in a minute, but let me ask you one specific question. The Barnett formula by which the money is determined, the calculation of the sums from the UK government to Scotland. You have defended the Barnett formula. You objected to a proposed replacement of it in a letter to George Osborne this month. And yet your buddies in Wales, Plaid Cymru, they want the Barnett formula scrapped. And they want, I quote from their manifesto, a new funding formula based on relative need. That sounds exactly like the needs-based formula that the Tories are proposing.
Yes, but that's spelt out in the Plaid Cymru SNP for Scotland, for Wales statement. We support the Welsh demands for a needs-based review, and they support our demands for financial autonomy for Scotland. That's a cross-support. That's in our statement of intent. Now, my complaint, incidentally, with George Osborne is not just that he wants to make an initiative, but crucially, and this is one of the key issues in the election, despite being asked 3 times subsequent to the meeting I had with him and Alistair Darling and Vince Cable alone, says that he would introduce such a change without the consent and agreement of the Scottish Government and the Scottish people.
It's going to be jolly hard. If you're dealing with parties at Westminster, it's going to be jolly hard. You're coming in with a supposedly Plaid SNP joint initiative, and you want different things.
Well, of course we want different things, because Scotland and Wales are different countries. Why there shouldn't we? But I can give mutual support to the people of Wales who are arguing for what they want, and they give support to us for arguing for what we want. Why on earth not, Brian?
But if the Tories are saying a needs-based review and Wales are saying whoopie-doo, go for it, and you're saying no, don't have a needs-based review across the UK, that would damage Scotland.
Well, let's remember with the Tories, and this is a key point, Brian, The key aspect with the Tories is not they've got a policy, but they intend to enforce that policy without the consent and agreement of the Scottish government.
Well, they would be the UK government in charge of spending for the UK.
Absolutely fundamental. The current funding settlement, which you know what it is the arrangements around the Barnett formula, say quite clearly that these must be evolved by agreement. The Tories seem to be saying, or at least are refusing to answer my question. I mean, the cock has crowed 3 times for young Mr Osborne, and I still don't have an answer. They seem to be saying that they would have this and then impose it upon the Scottish people without so much as a by your leave. Well, that's not on. And incidentally, it's one of the things that's eating away at the Tory campaign in Scotland.
What would you do with on another financial issue, the final one, what would you do with the banks in Scotland? I mean, you previously defended HBOS. You said that those who brought it down were spivs and speculators. You said that RBS was a fundamentally sound business not long before it collapsed. What would you do now with the banks in Scotland?
Well, can I just point out that anyone who has read, as I have, the emails that the Senate and American government are bringing forward now about the activities of Goldman Sachs in deliberately undermining and bringing down a massive fund which cost RBS, because of its takeover of ABN AMRO, some, I think, £600 million, as well as many, many other people, many, many tens of millions of dollars. Anyone who's read that could not possibly disagree with the description of spivs and speculators, because that's exactly what these people are.
What would you do now with the banks, Mr Salmond? Would you split them, as some are suggesting, into retail sector and what's called the casino sector?
I mean, I've heard in this election campaign, the Governor of the Bank of England being quoted and cited as a reference for that. I mean, I've actually looked at the speech he made, and what he said is there is a case for it. It would be worthy of consideration, I think, is his...
But you're against it, are you?
Well, I think it's worthy of consideration, but I don't think the division that you would talk about is as simple as retail and, as sometimes called, casino investment banking. What you'd have to decide is what areas of banking are subject to a government guarantee and which areas are not. And what would have to be remembered, of course, is we saw the consequences with Lehman Brothers of what might be called an investment, a casino bank, not being given a government guarantee, and the ramifications that had in the domino effect across the financial sector. So I think the Governor was putting forward an idea, but he was being quite cautious. He wasn't saying we should implement this idea, and I think he's in the right territory. And I think people who seize on half of the mark, like Vince Cable has done, should really look at the underlying aspect of the issue.
Let me seize on the remark of yours in that case.
Many.
Here we go, many remarks. A forecast of 20 seats at this election. Are you sticking to that forecast?
Yes, because we've got a week to go in the election, and I think this election has demonstrated that anything can happen in this election campaign. I mean, Harold Wilson said a week's a long time in politics. I think we'll find that this is a long week.
So you're forecasting you will win 20 seats?
Well,
you will...
Brian, let me say this. I think the election in Scotland will be won with a party on about 30% of the vote. In the Moray poll, the day before the first of the UK debates, the SNP were at 28% of the vote and heading to the best result in their history. Now, we have got a week to recapture that ground we've been deprived of by being kept off the airwaves and get us to that sort of level which would give us that. But
just looking at the seats at your targets, I mean, Oakland and South Perth is Oakland and South Perthshire, tiny swing, 0.74. That's obviously very, very marginal indeed. But the others are increasingly huge swings, and you've got some seats you would need to take where you're coming from third or even fourth. It doesn't look very likely that you'll reach that 20 target.
Beside someone who, if I remember correctly, came from fourth place in Gordon constituency to win the seat in the Scottish Parliament elections. And of course, not only...
That's you, Mr Salmond.
No.
The rest couldn't do that.
That's the SNP. Not only did we win the Scottish Parliament elections, and many folk doubted whether we could win the 20 seats required to do that, but last year, if you remember, we won the European elections and won 24 constituencies across Scotland. So we've proven in the last 2 elections we've got the capacity to do it. Now let's give you examples of some seats that would require large swings, where I'm not claiming they're definitely in the bag, because they're not, but the real contest, Dundee West, for example, or Livingston constituency, where I think even Labour sources are conceding that the SNP are probably in front now, or the seat I was in today in Falkirk, where incidentally we've been endorsed by Dennis Canavan.
I suppose I asked for that, but before you go through all 59 seats.
I don't have to go through all 59, I just have to get to 20.